Guys, today we actually have some good news, some big good developments, updates on the war in Ukraine. If you haven't watched my content for a while, then I guess I'll give you a little bit of background. I've been backing the Ukrainians in this war, this invasion on their land, ever since the beginning of Russia's invasion. Well, ever since before the beginning of it, since when Russia was mobilizing their tanks and their troops and their medical supplies and all these different things to the border with Ukraine to prepare for invasion, all the experts were saying, holy shit, Russia's going to invade Ukraine. And you had pro-Russian figures coming out to say, nah, this is just State Department propaganda. Nah, America just wants war. About 20 days later, after they started doing this, Russia started its first volley of bombings on Ukrainian land. It started with a long, multi-day series of bombings. I remember this very vividly because I covered it all live as it was happening. But ever since a few years ago when this started, it's been a very back and forth kind of thing. You know, small areas of Ukraine being lost to Russia, retaken, lost again, retaken. And in general, Ukraine has been losing more ground than I'm comfortable with, but has also maintained for way longer than I think most ever predicted that they would. Technically, this invasion started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. That is true. Like, we should consider the annexation of the Crimean Peninsula as the beginning of this, but I think most people kind of consider it like two separate invasions from Russia. A pattern of behavior, less so than like one prolonged like decade plus long operation. Regardless though, Russia has demonstrated immense levels of incompetence in their war with Ukraine. I've watched a lot of war footage and it's sometimes hilarious how quickly and easily Ukrainians can just wipe a squad of Russians without firing a bullet or killing any of them. One of my favorite examples, for those that don't know, Ukrainians can typically speak Russian, but Russians very rarely can speak Ukrainian. And Ukrainians can often speak Russian with a Russian accent as well, or at least a convincing fake Russian accent. And so what Ukrainian soldiers will sometimes do, and I've seen videos of this, it's amazing, is they will roll up on a basement or a house or a shed or a hole or a dugout of Russian soldiers. They'll approach it, and then they'll start screaming in Russian accents, come out and put your hands up, insert slur that Russians came up for Ukrainians. I'm not joking, they will pretend to be Russians who believe the Russian squad that's hiding out are a Ukrainian squad telling them to come out with their hands up, and then the Russians inside will be like, no, we're friendly. And the Ukrainians will say, oh, are you now? All right, come out with your weapons down, your hands up, okay? You might be Ukrainians. We don't know if we trust you. And so the Russian squad will come out with their weapons away and their hands up, and then they see the armbands on the Ukrainian soldiers, arms before, not before it's too late, or after it's too late, and they're like, shit, we fell for it. We're captured. We fell for it. I've seen this happen multiple times. Can confirm I speak both Ukrainian and Russian, can read both too. Struggle to write Russian though. I default to Ukrainian grammar rules, which are a little different. Interesting. But yeah, the being able to speak Russian factor has given the Ukrainians a massive boost in being able to like eliminate a squad of Russian soldiers without having to fire a bullet or take a life. And that's truly impressive. The surrendering Russians are the smartest Russians, to be honest. That's not even a lie. For the most part, I've yet to see a video where like a surrendering Russian soldier has been mistreated by the Ukrainians. It's always like, here's a cigarette. Would you like to call your mom? Like that kind of thing. So I gotta say, I'm rooting for Ukraine out here. I've been rooting for Ukraine from day one. And that is why I'm happy to announce that despite many hilarious fumbles from Russia, perhaps the biggest one, has just happened. For the last, week or so, Russia's internet has been down. Putin has not been seen in Moscow, apparently, and all the while, just today, or just yesterday, Ukraine launched a massive air raid on Russia. So I got a video here from the military show about this. I thought we'd go ahead and give it a watch. I've never seen this channel before,
Ukraine
so I don't know what their deal is, or if it's like AI or something, but it's got a lot of views. But let's see what this is about. Let's see what these war updates are all about, because I love to hear some good news coming out of this war.
Unleashed something massive on Moscow. The largest drone attack of the year is complete, and Russia is up in flames. Oil is burning, Russia's capital is under siege, and for Putin this means that the Russian people he has been trying to protect in his country's most important city have just gotten a massive dose of the reality of war. The Moscow Times has the details.
Dude, it's gotta feel so good for Ukraine to be blowing shit up in Russia. Like, the first round of Ukraine getting to blow shit up that's in Russia in this war must have felt so goddamn good. Like, I just imagine Zelensky sitting at his desk, and they tell him, "Sir, the shot's landed, and the Russian power plant is on fire," and he just goes, and just does the I show speed smile, you know, the one.
On March 16th, it reported that the weekend had seen Ukraine unleash a multi-day barrage of drones at the Russian capital, which has amounted to one of the largest seen since the beginning of the war. The attacks have continued into March 16th, according to Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin.
Holy shit, it melted the metal, sheet roof.
They show that Ukraine has flipped the switch and decided that Russia's capital is fair game. Of course,
Yeah, considering Russia decided Kyiv was fair game 3 years ago, I'd say fair.
Sobyanin makes the same claim that Russia always makes when faced with Ukraine's drones, which is that air defenses have destroyed everything. However, it's the sheer numbers in the swarms that Ukraine has unleashed that pack the biggest punch here. Over the past 2 days, air defense forces have destroyed approximately 250 enemy UAVs on approach to Moscow, and at the second line of approach, Moscow's mayor said in a Telegram post. What we see here is Ukraine taking the gloves off while showing Putin and his Kremlin cronies that Moscow, which is the one city that Putin wants to protect ahead of all others in Russia, is within Ukraine's range and can be hit. The sheer psychological trauma being brought on by Ukraine's escalating aerial strategy could be enough to pressure Putin into pulling the plug on his invasion, as we'll cover when we get deeper into the video. But before...
Dude, who was it? Prigozhin? Was that his name? The guy who led the ex-con squad of Russian spec ops in Ukraine that formed a coup and tried to overthrow Putin. When that shit happened, I was shocked that didn't end the Wagner group. I was shocked that didn't end the war. When a good chunk of Putin's own army turned on him. Granted, they were criminals that he just rapists and murderers that he sicked on Ukrainian families and towns, but that really did turn on him, didn't it?
Before we get to that, it's worth exploring the sheer scale of Ukraine's Moscow attack. This isn't the first time that Ukraine has launched drones at Moscow. Back in March 2025, almost a year to the day before Ukraine unleashed its record-breaking drone assault, Ukraine had tried something similar in Moscow. That attack saw 91 of Ukraine's drones get shot down in and around Russia's capital city, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, and it led to 3 people dying. There are no casualties reported for Ukraine's latest
we'll
attack,
send more.
At least not yet. But eyewitnesses at the scene have reported plenty of explosions, and Ukraine has forced the closure of airports all across the Moscow region. The Kyiv Post reports that people on the ground have claimed to have seen explosions in Moscow's Troitsky administrative district, along with Podolsk, Domodedovo, Dubna, Mozhaisk, Istra, Solnechegorsk, and Narofominsk have all come under fire as Ukraine rattles off drones almost indiscriminately at Russia's capital city and surrounding regions.
How cool would it be if Trump did something Trump would never do, and did something crazy? It's Trump does crazy shit, but he would never do something that's this good and crazy. Imagine if Trump just gave Ukraine a nuke. Just said,
We'd like to announce we're giving Ukraine a free nuke. Ukraine's a very good ally of America. They give us a lot of natural resources. We get a lot of grain from Ukraine. Bars. I'm a president, not a rapper. But still, we're giving Zelensky a nuke. He can do whatever he wants with it. It's on him. It's his decision.
I feel like that would be what would end the war.
Then there are the airport closures. Rosovyetskaya, which is Russia's aviation authority, has imposed flight restrictions on several of Russia's airports in response to Ukraine's enormous drone attack. Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Zhukovsky, and Sheremetyevo airports have all seen flights get cancelled or delayed, and only Vnukovo has managed to return to a point where it can operate normally. All the rest of these airports are dispatching flights in coordination with relative authorities, Kyiv Post reports. Airport closures aren't the only problem affecting Russia right now. Far away from Moscow, oil is burning. We'll reveal where in just a few minutes, but don't underestimate how important it is for Ukraine to close down Moscow's airports. Every airport closure leads to delayed or cancelled flights, which in turn can leave thousands of Russian travelers stranded in airports. Psychologically, this is as surefire a sign as any that Ukraine's drones are reaching Russian territory. No matter how hard Putin works to suppress the evidence of drone strikes, which is one of the driving forces behind the Kremlin shutting down access to Telegram, flights being halted for safety reasons sends a clear message.
Yeah, you shut down the internet, across Russia in order to keep people from talking about the fact that Russia's actually getting smacked by Ukraine right now. After years of this, drawn-out war that Putin claimed would end in days. 3 days, we would take Kiev, is what he said. 3 days and we take Kiev, was his claim. Meanwhile, Kiev still has not fallen. Still up, still vibing, still popping off, still fighting back. And now, Ukraine's actually blowing shit up on Russian soil this far into the war. It is not a good look for Putin. We've already seen a lot of that, let's paint a white Z on our door kind of Russian nationalism energy die out. It's not dead, but it's there's a lot less people in Russia with white Z's painted on their door these days. It's not as common as it was a few years back. People are not exactly repping their pride about the war like they were. And so, I don't know. It's looking like Ukraine might be winning the actual war, in the sense that sooner than later, Putin's probably going to have to pull the plug on this and start withdrawing his troops. And if Ukrainians are willing to fight, even after Putin's pulling out, there's a good chance that Ukraine can take back every bit of land that has been lost to Russia so far. I could potentially see this going bad enough for Putin that he just gives up all that has been taken. That's my hope, at least. That's what I've been kind of rooting for from the start, is that this ends up being such a massive, unpopular mistake for Putin that he just completely throws it and just gives up.
Ukraine's drones are in the skies. Flight cancellations also lead to ticket refunds, which snatch income out of the Kremlin's pocket. We saw something similar in July 2025 when a mass drone attack on 10 of Russia's cities led to 2,000 flights being delayed and another 485 being cancelled. Around 43,000 tickets had to be refunded as a result of these issues, and that's a lot of taxable income being put
It went from being the internet to the internet.
back into the pocket of Russian citizens that the Kremlin can't get its hands on. So every strike that shuts down airports is a strike that costs Putin's war machine monetarily, as well as a strike that stabs into the heart of the propaganda that the Kremlin tries to force down the collective throats of the Russian people. There's another interesting wrinkle to this story. Per the Kyiv Post, according to the Russian military blogging Telegram channel Shot, Ukraine used FP-1 drones in the attacks on Moscow. Ukraine reportedly launched these drones in waves of 8 to 10 units at a time. Each of these drones is capable of carrying up to 60 kilograms or 132 pounds of explosives, and can travel for up to 1,400 kilometers or 869 miles, placing Moscow well within their range.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Putin is not out of Ukraine's reach unless he's in a bunker somewhere. That's the crazy thing is, like, Ukraine's got some of the most powerful allies on the planet. There's no shot that... Well, this actually is a good example. Ukraine could have annihilated Russia's navy. Literally wiped, like, 90% of Russia's navy off the face of the earth in the first month of the war. And this is one of my biggest criticisms of Joe Biden. People say I'm like a big Joe Biden dick rider, but this is one of my biggest criticisms of Joe Biden. He refused to give Zelensky the go-ahead to basically one fell swoop destroy Russia's navy. It was all parked, like 90% of Russia's navy was parked in Ukraine's backyard in perfect distance to just bomb it. And Biden would not give the go-ahead because Biden didn't want to allow any escalation, quote unquote. I'm still salty about that. Ukraine had the opportunity to cripple Russia for decades in one fell swoop, and Biden told Zelensky no.
These drones are fairly new additions to the aerial aspect of the Ukraine war. The FP1 was unveiled in May 2025, though it was reported to be capable of carrying an explosive twice the size that the Kyiv Post claims, as well as being able to travel 200 kilometers or 124 miles further. Military says that Ukraine was already producing the drones in large numbers by May, and that they had been used to conduct several attacks on Russia. Fast forward to November, and the New Voice of Ukraine also reported on the FP1, highlighting it as a drone that's capable of reshaping Ukraine's entire long-range strategy. The FP1 is the cheapest and most efficient drone in its class, the drone's manufacturer, Firepoint, said at the time. And with a low cost comes the ability to launch...
I don't think Russia has access to the manufacturing of this stuff either. That's a big part of it. Like, Russia is kind of cut off from a lot of the supply chains that produce what Ukraine is benefiting from, because Russia is not friendly with the rest of the capitalist free world.
Massive swarms of these drones, which is precisely what we're seeing in Moscow right now. With the FP1, Ukraine has a cheap drone that it can use to overwhelm Russia's air defenses. Though the Moscow attack doesn't appear to have borne any fruit yet, at least none that's being reported, what Ukraine has here is a strike that delivers a clear warning to Putin. When combined with Ukraine's drone missile hybrids, such as the Flamingo, the FP1 could be a drone that Ukraine can use to clear a path through Moscow's air defenses, allowing for devastating strikes against Russia's capital. We say that no fruit appears to have come from one of the largest strikes against Moscow that we've seen so far in the war. The reality is that we don't really know anything beyond the scraps of information that the Russian authorities have delivered. They claim no casualties and around 250 drones shot down. But Ukraine is keeping quiet, and Moscow...
Dude, how would we feel if Ukraine full Uno reverse card and turned Moscow into rubble? Would we celebrate that, even if it meant just immense amounts of civilian death, just like what has happened in Ukraine? I don't know, at this point, anything that makes Putin stop invading Ukraine, it's like, shit.
Has made some moves during these strikes that indicate that it's desperately trying to maintain control over the narrative. Take the Telegram shutdowns we mentioned earlier. The Moscow Times reports that the same weekend that saw Ukraine unleash its barrage of FP1s also saw people all across Russia lose access to Telegram. A full crackdown is being anticipated in April, which could spell the end of the...
Dude, when Russia didn't have internet for those few days, it was wild how much less right-wing propaganda I was seeing on my timelines. Like, Russia's internet is down. How can you tell? My timeline is far less conservative than it was a day ago.
Social media app in Russia. But this latest outage coinciding with Ukraine's attack...
Isn't it crazy how none of those Republican Texan dads, none of those MAGA Texan dads were posting through that entire stint where Russia's internet was out? That's kind of weird, huh?
Indicates that the Kremlin is jumping the gun, perhaps to prevent news and footage of the strikes against Moscow from circulating. Telegram has basically stopped working for many Russians who don't use virtual private networks, the Moscow Times reports. And that loss of Telegram isn't the only indicator that Russia is trying to hide something. As the Kyiv Post reported on March 15th, what amounts to a digital blackout has also settled over Moscow and St. Petersburg over the last couple of days. This blackout appears to have been instigated by the Kremlin and has cut 19 million people off from mobile internet services. There are rumblings that this has something to do with a coup plot created as Putin slashes away at Russia's defense ministry with cuts. But what it all amounts to is Russia going out of its way to take the tools that its own people can use to report on the success, or otherwise, of Ukraine's record-breaking drone attacks against Moscow.
I'm going to say it now. I do not see Putin dying peacefully in a bed. I think Putin's probably gonna get executed in the street. I think that's probably gonna be how he dies, if I'm being honest. I just, at this point, I don't see him dying peacefully in a bed. I see him getting assassinated, poisoned, or publicly executed in the street by the people of Russia. Or executed by the new government that usurps him. I can definitely see that. I actually think the most likely scenario is killed by the new government of Russia, whatever new government ends up happening. I could definitely see a coup happening. There's been multiple attempts. There's a guy who has killed so many of his political opponents in the past, too. He's got to have so many enemies who are just quiet, silent, in fact, but broiling with petty hatred for the guy. There's got to be a whole, like, secret caucus of people in the Russian oligarchy that want this dude's head on a spike. Like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, I feel. I think we're all gonna live to see the end of Putin's story. And I think it's gonna be televised, too. It's definitely gonna be televised.
This is suppression of evidence. Suppression of reporting, or Russia's people, and of the truth that Putin so desperately wants to keep contained. But for as hard as the Kremlin works to hold together its narrative in Moscow, another region of Russia is providing plenty of evidence that Ukraine's drones are striking their targets. We'll tell you what that region is and what happened in a moment. But before we do, this is a quick reminder.
Trump won't help him escape that. I don't think Trump could help him escape it if it was like an internal coup or like people's revolution against Putin. What could he do? What could he do if Putin's like palace falls on Monday and on Monday night they execute him on TV? You know, it's like, what can Trump do to stop that? Like, realistically, how could he possibly stop it besides like bombing the shit out of the country? Like, what could he do? Realistically, nothing. But who knows? Who knows? Listen, I'm feeling optimistic. I'm in a good mood. You know, this good news has me in a good mood, and I'm feeling optimistic that we're going to see some pretty happy outcomes to some of these stories. What can I say? Call me naive if you will, but I'm not a doomer. You'll never see me be a doomer, all right? Putin obsessively watched the footage of Gaddafi getting killed in the streets. He knows what's coming. He knows what's coming. That's foreshadowing right there. Anyway, folks, if you enjoyed this segment, if you found it entertaining, enjoyable, or educational, or entertaining in any way, then please consider leaving a like and a comment down below. Subscribe if you want to see me again and you don't want me to get lost in the algorithm. Ring the bell icon as well to do the same, and comment down below. Follow my social medias, join my fan Discord, and if you want to go the extra mile, support the channel and the stream monetarily, consider donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub to somebody else on my website or through YouTube. But regardless of how you support the channel, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.